Stephanie here from Sewing with Stephanie. As you guys know, this is the place to learn about sewing and design, and we make it cool, modern, and fun. Anyway, so today we are learning about how to take that basic bodice pattern and turn it from what you've draped in muslin into a paper pattern. It's called truing it up. It's basically tracing. It's super easy and straightforward. But learning those basics is going to help you take much more complicated patterns and turn it into beautiful pattern pieces that you can use over and over and over again. So, in order to get started, I need to make sure you guys do a few things. You know what it is. 1, click subscribe down below, and then thumbs up. Make sure you like it so that other people who are also looking for sewing and fashion videos can find me. In order to get started, you need tracing paper, your pattern pieces, and an 18-inch clear see-through ruler. You can also use your measuring tape, and I recommend a dressmaker's curve, although it is absolutely not necessary. I like to start by placing my pattern piece underneath the tracing paper and tracing it from there. I always start at the center front, and I'm going to use a pen so that you guys can see it. But what I like to do is mark off my center front and my waist, and then make a straight line from there, since that should be on the grain. Sometimes it's not quite straight underneath, and that's what we're doing here. We are truing it up and making it straight. And then I'm going to trace my dots here and draw my curve. This is where a dressmaker's curve can come in handy. If you prefer to, if your hand is a little shaky or making curves isn't your strongest suit, you can use a dressmaker's curve and make a curve using that as well. Oftentimes, the most common way to use a dressmaker's curve is on the armhole. So by picking that side seam and your shoulder seam, and then kind of finding the curve that seems to fit the best. You may have to move your dressmaker's curve a little bit and then trace it. Everything is very straightforward until you start trying to match it up to the back, because oftentimes you think when you make the pattern that everything's straight, and then you realize, oh my goodness, it's not straight at all. The waistline, there will naturally be a bit of a curve. Again, you can use the dressmaker's curve, or I just go by hand. Now, the dart is in here. You can see the natural fall of the dart, and there are a few lines here, a few dots that are kind of wonky. For now, I'm just going to match it up like this. What the proper thing to do here is to measure the full width from edge to edge of that dart. I have it as 3 inches and 3/4, and then find the middle. So that's going to be 1.5 inches and 3/8. Okay, that's the middle. Then you want to create the line up the middle from there. And you can see maybe I should actually change the point of this dart a little to be right in the center. And then you can draw the dart legs to the point, making sure it's even with the original point. So it should be, to recap, the dart should be the same height as the original, but now you've just bifurcated it into 2 to make sure both sides of the dart are even. Now, we already had on our prior piece the cross grain, but it's always best practice to actually mark the straight grain instead. So as you know, the center front for this pattern is on the straight grain, so that's pretty easy. I'm just gonna mark over from it and add the little arrows, which signifies the straight grain. At this point, I can remove my pattern piece from underneath, and you can kind of play around to be like, okay, well maybe that dart, I didn't make it perfect, etc. You can mark center front with CF, and then you can write in, again, I would say Stephanie basic bodice. I'm gonna write the date, and then I would say that this is the front of my basic bodice. And then with your center front, you want to make sure you're identifying, is this something that you are cutting on the fold, or is this something that should have a seam line? So if this is just a cut on the fold, oftentimes you will actually make this symbol with the little curve that indicates that you will cut this on the fold. I have my front piece. What I want to do is take a look at that shoulder seam line and make sure it matches up. And I'm looking at it right now. It doesn't quite look like it matches up. It might be hard to see in the video, but it looks like my front is about an eighth of an inch wider or longer than the back. The next thing to think about are our seam allowances. It's standard in the industry for a store-bought pattern to have 5/8 of an inch, although commercial patterns tend to have a bit smaller, like a half an inch or sometimes 2 centimeters if you are in the UK or on the metric system. I'm gonna use a ½ inch. That's what I learned. That's what I'm most comfortable with. So now that I've added the seam allowance on both pieces, it's important to make a few more notes. One, I've added in the ½ inch allowance. So I've made a note of that on both pieces. I've also made a note that this front piece would be cutting 1 on the fold and there's no seam allowance there. Whereas my back piece, I'm going to be cutting 2. So I want to make sure I say cut 2. So you always know how many to cut of each piece. The last step, because there are really no notches on these pieces because they're 2 very basic pieces, you know what connects to what. It is important though to get in the habit of notching the armholes. So you do 1 notch to the front and 2 for the back. So that's it for today. We turned your basic bodice into a paper pattern and now it's good to use time and time again. You can save it. You can also turn these into cardboard or cardstock patterns, which I highly recommend for a basic bodice pattern like this, and make multiple copies. You're gonna use it all the time. Okay, see you around next time. Thanks for following Sewing with Stephanie.